July 7th witnessed the worldwide release of Science SARU's Ghost in the Shell series, as Major Motoko Kusanagi was brought back to our screens and our lives with a new adaptation. And it stands out compared to its predecessors, because instead of sticking to the predominantly grim and stoic tone of the other films and series, the 2026 series adapts the more light-hearted action comedy-like tone of the manga. Those who haven't read the original work wouldn't believe that the rain-soaked, cold female protagonist, experiencing a complex identity crisis due to being a ghost in the shell, loved to goof around in the manga. Science SARU's Major Kusanagi, stepping into the shoes of her original, messier and goofier version, isn't the only way it's different from the 1995 film. Which brings me to making this list, stating 10 major differences with Major Kusanagi as we know her and her 2026 counterpart. The Major was never supposed to be this serious. When we think Major Motoko Kusanagi, we almost always associate her with a stoic and dry personality, typical of a cyborg who's almost completely cybernetic. Yeah, there are the occasional flashes of humor and humanity, as seen with her opening joke in the 1995 film where she claims she's on her period, even though she's physically incapable of having one. But she's mostly a serious character. But this image is not canon to the manga, where Major Kusanagi is more upbeat, humorous, and devoid of the stiff upper lip. In fact, humor is ever present across the original manga, not in a manner that is a comedy work like Kaguya-sama, Love is War, but more in a first season of Jujutsu Kaisen way. As such, the comedic tone is consistent and exaggerated by Masamune Shirow's art style, which allows for animated expressions. I've also noticed that animated expressions are often ever present across female-fronted mangas such as Fruits Basket or Kaichuwa's Maid Summer, or even more serious works like Nana, provided there's a comedic element to the manga, of course. Changes came with Mamoru Oshii's adaptation, that is the 1995 film that we associate with the image of Ghost in the Shell, where Oshii removed all comedic elements and redirected the focus onto the heavy philosophy with respect to the ghost, or Makoto's introspection to understand or acknowledge her human nature. There's also heavier emphasis on world building and other elements such as artificial intelligence and what it means for humanity. Not to say that the manga doesn't have them, but it's not as primary to the manga as it is to the anime. Every subsequent adaptation of Ghost in the Shell, be it standalone, complex, or Arise, has followed Oshii's pattern over Shirow's. In fact, the dry and stoic techno-focused atmosphere became the hallmark for Ghost in the Shell and the cyberpunk genre as a whole. Manga Motoko is petty, jealous, and kind of a mess. For those who are unaware of the manga, imagining Major Motoko Kusanagi as a bitchy, greedy, sexual, and sometimes even a hateful woman is difficult. It gets even more jarring when you have to imagine her with a hyper-animated expression such as having a tongue gap while she pulls her lips apart to make a funny face, or when she's pissed off and has the characteristic comedic sharp teeth that's often done to add cattiness to her character. I mean, a very good modern example would be how Mao Mao from the Apothecary Diaries is depicted, who is a super nonchalant character until she's in front of what she loves most, and that is poison. Suddenly, she has cat ears and a tail and sometimes sharp feline teeth. Major Kusanagi gets a similar treatment in the manga, except she's much less nonchalant in comparison to Mao Mao. The manga also has black comedy, other sight gags, and Bateau from Section 9 is often the butt of all jokes. Oshii's work not only filtered out these jokes, but also refined the art style to be one that is more serious and appropriate with respect to the philosophy and techno-horror-centric world he established for Ghost in the Shell, thus bringing us to his more refined, fine-line art style over Shirow's more catty and animated one. Bateau was the class clown. Now, Kusanagi is. While the manga has both Kusanagi and Bateau in comedic roles, 1995 onwards, we see a more stoic Kusanagi, always disciplining a goofier Bateau who she keeps in life. But with the 2026 release under Science SARU, the dynamic flips. She stops being the one to chastise Bateau and instead becomes the quick-tempered character who enables him and eggs him on, bringing her closer to Shirow's original Makoto Kusanagi. She reverts back to being her goofy, multifaceted self, which, in my opinion, creates two interesting avenues. One, it subverts the stoicism associated with the cyberpunk genre by and large, and puts it into animation. Second, adopting the original dynamic backplays emphasis on why Shiro intentionally put such a comedic character in such a serious universe. Intentional humor is a very pure expression of humanity. If we're dealing with a character who is 99% machine, humanity needs to be present in the form of humor, especially because we can't have a cry throughout the show. For me, it adds emphasis to the concept of the ghost in the shell. I think that this is great for the current landscape of anime, because slightly goofy female protagonists are currently all the rage, such as Mau Mau and of course Frieren. Super on top of their game. Kinda cold, kinda goofy, we love to see it. It's also a breath of fresh air after a long run of very serious or headstrong protagonists like Eren Yeager, Gabimaru, Thorfinn, and so on. Not to say that one is better than the other, but a bit of a change is necessary to keep things fun and fresh. No one likes an overkill. But of course, it's not like Major Kusanagi is goofing around all the time. There's more of a balance. Overall, Science SARU aims to preserve Shiro's artistic vision, overadding to Oshi's creative direction. The bisexual island chapter, Hollywood Never Touched. Major Kusanagi is often referred to as the bisexual disaster by her fans, and this is something that you'd never know if not for the manga. Not just that, but she's highly sexual, with the manga having an entire chapter known as Junk Jungle, being dedicated to exploring an island escapade of the Major, where she's having the time of her life in a yacht with other women, enjoying cybernetic virtual. Western adaptations have often dropped the prince for this chapter, but it not only explores Major Kusanagi's queerness and her occasional hypersexuality, but it also dives into a very interesting sexually targeted feature of the cyborg body. For starters, the Major's cybernetic skin is more sensitive than that of other cyborgs. This is important because cyborgs can link with each other, kinda like a Bluetooth, and mutually experience sexual sensations. This is achieved via an illegal software called Endorno. It's an underground network and something that Kusanagi taps into to make more money, and her high-performance body makes her better at carrying the task out, allowing her to link and share the network with multiple people at once. But the catch is that the sex has to be homosexual because of compatibility. Heterosexual intercourse is illegal due to male and female body parts having separate erogenous zones, so stimulation of one while linked with the opposite sex will cause excessive pain for the one who lacks said sexual organ. On the other hand, the animated cyborgs from 1995 and onwards don't have genitals, kinda like Barbies and Titans from Attack on Titan. The manga isn't subtle with the sexual depictions either, and gets extremely explicit with the yacht scenes involving Major Kusanagi and the cybernetic girls. Meanwhile, the anime, while not devoid of nudity, doesn't sexualize the nude body. In fact, nudity desexualizes Major Kusanagi even more, because the depiction and Kusanagi's reason for her occasional nudity are both far from sexual. Manga-Motoko had backup bodies stashed across the globe. The manga isn't limited to the cityscapes of the anime in terms of world building and is spread out across multiple locations. Motoko in the anime is mostly shown to possess a single body. That is, until the end, when her original body is destroyed against the tank, and Bateau has to transfer her consciousness, Ghost, which is now merged with the ghost of the puppet master, to a separate body. But in the manga, she had multiple bodies stashed across the globe. The intention was to body hop in order to execute world-spanning operations without having to waste time on transit. As the Major could project her ghost across a secure network, she had the ability to rapidly switch from one body to the next and quickly find herself in the necessary locations without having to rely on physical transportation. This is basically how she was able to go from a military hearing in the city to the depths of a dense forest in a ridiculously short period of time. The Major also had several types of bodies. A lot of the stashed bodies were the standard mass-produced cyborg type, bearing resemblance to the Major's primary cybernetic body. The Major's primary body was the mass-produced one, instead of some visibly extraordinary model due to convenience of operations. This also meant that a significant portion of the stacked bodies would need to be similar. These bodies, however, are not necessarily ones that need to resemble a Japanese woman, as there have been instances of Makoto's other bodies having a Caucasian appearance. Hypothetically, if she suddenly has to pop up in Sweden for a covert operation, it'd obviously help to look Caucasian so as to fly under the radar. Not to defend ScarJo's casting for Ghost in the Shell, but her being white is basically not impossible. It can be inauthentic, yeah, but not impossible. Anyway, these were often specialized combat models meant for specific tactical missions, instead of the aforementioned civilian shells that only found variation in hair color and cosmetics. Why the 1995 designers aged her up on purpose. Masamune Shiro's Major Kusanagi has a characteristic 80s Yu Yu Hakusho-like art style, and with that comes a cute cat-like face with sparkling eyes and an overall youthful appearance. One of the key design factors causing it isn't as much the eyes, but the nose. The characters being given a small, upturned nose where the nose bridge is barely drawn. Overall, it's a neotenous feature. This appearance works well with the catty humor and cat-like depictions, but Oshi's more serious tone requires one to detach from this appearance, bringing us to a design alteration. Character designer Hiroyuki Okiura, as such, designed Makoto to look more mature and essentially aged her up, while she retains her larger eyes. A key difference in her appearance is her sharper, straighter nose, drawn from the bridge down to the base. Her face is also a bit less compact and has a more aristocratic and oval structure, instead of the original shortened and compact cheek and nose region. This also allows Makoto to look slightly closer to her mental age and overall fits better with the stoic and philosophical atmosphere of Oshi's work. A new voice steps into Atsuko Tanaka's shoes. For the longest time, Atsuko Tanaka voiced Major Kusanagi and became synonymous with the character. She went on to be renowned as a voice artist who was spectacular with depicting powerful, mature women, with works like Flamme from Frieren, Conan from Naruto, Siran from Devilman Crybaby, Slan from Berserk, and Lisa from JoJo's Bizarre Adventures in her roster. Major Kusanagi has been her most successful and renowned depiction. However, tragedy struck 2 years ago, with Tanaka passing away at the age of 61 due to a year-long battle against an undisclosed illness. Her subsequent tribute witnessed fans refer to her as the Major. Such was the gravitas, and such was the connection between her voice and Kusanagi's character. Like I said, they'd become synonymous to one another, but this spelled complications for Science SARU, who would now have to find a voice actor to voice a character people are extremely attached to. Such instances of passing the baton can often go wrong, even with great training. While we have Susie Young for the English dub as the new voice on the block for Major Kusanagi, and she has experience voicing characters like Makima in the dub, Maya Sakamoto took over voicing the Major for the original Japanese version. She previously voiced a young Kusanagi in the original film, and also starred in Arise. She too has voiced significant female characters known for being more serious, such as Eto from Tokyo Ghoul, Leela from Code Geass, Mari from Evangelion, and Akito from Fruits Basket. Needless to say, she was the only one who could shoulder the responsibility of handling Tanaka's magnum opus. Zero AI. All hand-drawn. Science SARU's big statement. What makes me look forward to Science SARU's adaptation so much isn't just Major Kusanagi reverting to her original humorous element, but the studio itself refusing to use any kind of AI and sticking to hand-drawn animation only. AI aside, even CGI can get annoying. And while I understand the need for it, after all, it saves money and time. And we know damn well how difficult animators in Japan have it. Hand-drawn animation is simply the best. There's just something about human work that technology can only assist, never replicate. The revelation of this at the 2026 Annecy International Animation Film Festival came as a huge moment due to the recent revelations of rival Wit Studio, confirming its usage of AI-generated backgrounds in one of their recent productions. Of course, conversations have opened up around the usage of AI and whether it will replace human artists. There's also the viral moment of Miyazaki, who claimed to be disgusted by AI animation and called it an insult to life itself. I do love Wit Studios' works, and I'm looking forward to their adaptation of One Piece. But we have to give this point to Science SARU and Miyazaki. Coming to the part where animators are underpaid and overworked, I feel that the mentality should be geared more towards paying them better and giving them better work hours instead of putting them in a position where they have no choice but to use AI. Yep, this will come at the expense of decreasing the output of the amount of anime we get weekly. But we, as a society, need to get rid of our excessive dependence on constant entertainment. It's not like entertainment wasn't good a decade or two ago. We're literally still discussing a work from the last century. Art is better when artists have time, space, energy, and money. The chants are gone. Contemporary music took over. Ghost in the Shell has one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. A score written by Kenji Kawai and marked by chants reminiscent of classical Japanese music, minyo, and complex Bulgarian harmonies, as seen with the opening title known as Making of a Cyborg. The music successfully created an ambiance that felt equally parts folk and avant-garde. Overall, it allowed Ghost in the Shell to craft a haunting soundscape with its chorals. The chants are essentially a wedding song that's sung to dispel evil energies. Very old school, very traditional and folk in a high-tech world. These chants were a quintessential part of the music we initially associated with the series. That's not to say that the franchise does not or did not use more modern-sounding work. For starters, we got the Cantonese pop number of See You Every Day from Fang Ka Wing, which was clearly a different vibe and genre compared to the rest of the soundtrack. Other outliers were the English dub's usage of U2 and Brian Eno's 1 Minute Warning, which was used as the ending instead of See You Every Day. But more importantly, we need to bring up Millennium Parade, which is a creative collective under Daiki Tsuneta's direction, who was a producer and songwriter in Japan, and France-known bands like King Gnu, and that's the group responsible for the iconic JJK opening specials. And Science SARU appointed this very collective for their ending song, giving up the track known as Blue by Millennium Parade, featuring Daniel Caesar and Saya Gray. The song strays far away from the chants of Making of a Cyborg and instead leans toward alternative styles and electropop with some soulful R&B vocals. By the way, King Gnu did the opening, known as Go Ghost, which, in typical King Gnu fashion, is alternative Japanese rock, once again straying from the choral soundscape previously established by Kenji Kawai. But this is not something out of the ordinary, because the OST for the new series has been composed by a new set of musicians, namely Tasai Iwazaki, Yuki Kanasaka, and Ryo Konishi. However, 2026 isn't the first time that Millennium Parade has been associated with the franchise. Standalone Complex 2045 had them coming up with arguably my favourite song across Ghost in the Shell, the eclectic jazzy hip-hop and alternative electronic number known as Fly With Me. Stellar production, fantastic composition, perfectly fitting for a high-tech world overrun by cyborgs. One movie plot versus a season of standalone cases. A series is obviously going to be more detailed than a film. Films run on a far more limited runtime, and as such, have to make a concise version of manga storylines for depiction. The Ghost in the Shell that experiences the heights of this necessary compression is the Puppet Master's arc. As the film fused multiple manga chapters for the depiction, the series doesn't need to suffer from this and spread the chapters out in the form of episodes. Want an ideal pacing? Well, adapt 2.5 chapters into 1 episode. Want slow pacing? Go for 1.5. Falling back on the source material? Stretch 1 chapter out as much as possible. A series is full of possibilities when it comes to pacing. Of course, if you stretch out a chapter for each episode, well, you're going to get hated by the fans. I mean, no amount of loving One Piece can make you say that you love Toei's pacing. It gets to a point, but on the bright side, you don't have to omit canon elements from the manga. Sometimes, to go forward, you need to go back, and Major Kusanagi has spent 3 decades living in the shadow of a version of herself that, although not inauthentic, is not who she was when conceived. So, we return to the source and witness her in all her fun-loving glory. And with that, we wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Do share your opinion with us in the comments, and of course, like and subscribe, and have a great day.